Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So I just watched Miss Marvel. Let's talk about it. So first of all, before we get into my thoughts on Miss Marvel, just a quick disclaimer. Today it is incredibly hot. Today it is incredibly hot here in the UK, and I film in a very tiny room, so it's about to get even hotter for me. So we're just going to keep this as chill and relaxed as possible, because otherwise I'm going to die of heat stroke on camera. Literally on camera. So we're going to try and keep it a nice chill discussion about the latest Marvel series, Miss Marvel, which recently wrapped up on Disney Plus. And of course, before we get into the discussion, as per usual, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure you turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next. And also, I wanted to say a massive thank you to all of you guys who have been wishing me well because of my toothache. Last week it was particularly bad. Things are getting a little bit better now, but I still need to get that wisdom tooth yanked out. I still need to get it taken out, okay? But my appointment's in a few weeks, so we'll see. In the meantime though, thank you so much for your lovely words. I really appreciate it. And even though it's been a tough week, your words and your encouragement definitely made me feel a little bit better. So thank you guys, love you guys. And without further ado, let's get into my review of Miss Marvel. So first of all, unfortunately, we need to discuss some of the backlash and controversy that surrounded this series. Now, much like a lot of the projects that we have been seeing coming out, particularly from Disney, which dares to have more progressive elements to them, Miss Marvel fell victim to a ton of review bombing before the first episode of the show even dropped on disneyplus.com, and it was atrocious to see. I mean, I was looking at the reviews that were dropped on IMDb, and I mentioned this in a previous video. I can't remember which one, but I've been talking about it quite a bit lately because it keeps happening. But a lot of these reviews and a lot of the ratings that were given to Miss Marvel before it even aired a single episode were given by older men who expressed their disapproval of the genre and of the subject matter and the characters that are represented on the show before the show had even dropped on Disney Plus. And I think that is just so horrendous. It's so insidious to do so. I just think these people need to get hobbies, quite frankly. Like, I'm so sick and tired of seeing this level of anger and backlash towards shows that dare to explore characters beyond just white male characters that we're used to seeing all throughout media, especially in the West. I think these people need to wake up and realize that there are literally over 7 billion people on this planet. Not everyone looks the same, not everyone comes from the same culture or same racial background, and all these other people, the other people that exist on this planet, deserve to have representation in media as well. They want to see themselves on screen through these heroic characters who have a huge cultural impact, especially in media. They deserve to be able to do so. So this anger and backlash that comes about whenever studios dare to step out of the box, the accepted box of who can be represented on screen, who deserves a lead role versus who should be cast aside as a supporting role, I think it's really interesting. It's really telling that some of these people all of a sudden are realizing that there are 7 billion people on the planet and not everyone looks, sounds, acts, and even comes from the same places as them, and it's making them very uncomfortable. It's making these people very uncomfortable. But you know what, at the end of the day, I don't care. I don't care. You can cry your little tears somewhere else. As I said previously, cry me a whole river. I do not care, because at the end of the day, this representation is important, it matters, and also these studios are dealing with global brands. Long gone are the days where they're only pandering towards a white majority audience. These days, these are franchises garner millions upon millions of dollars, okay, all around the world, including including in Asian countries. So even if this series isn't for you in particular because it doesn't match your demographic perfectly, there are many people across the world who are just so thrilled to be seeing this representation, and that also has monetary value for these studios as well. And make no mistake, these studios are not charities. They are in it for the money, they're in it for the business, and so they've done the internal calculations to say that this progressiveness can actually gain a profit for them. As I've mentioned in previous videos where I've discussed the backlash against progressiveness that we've seen in Hollywood, one of the side effects to all of this backlash and all of this discourse online is that you can't then properly analyze or critique the project in hand because it becomes so clouded and so jaded with all of this other commentary that has nothing to do with the quality of the work on screen. And I think that's a shame as well. It does a disservice to the project because now whenever someone could raise a genuine or valid critique of that project, it could be dismissed as, you know, oh, they're just being racist, or they don't want to see representation, etc. and so forth. But those two things are separate. There are some people who appreciate that representation, who appreciate the direction that the franchise is going in, but still see some issues, okay, some critiques that they want to raise in order to improve further or future installments of that franchise. And then there are others who are literally just talking out of their asses. Like there are others who are talking out of their bigoted asses. They're separate camps, and I want to emphasize that even though I do have issues with this series and there are critiques that I have, it has nothing to do with the style of representation, you know, or me being upset or angry about that. You guys all know this because I'm always a proponent of greater representation in media, but for me it's a case of wanting to raise valid critiques so that any future installments could be better, although I doubt anyone from Marvel is watching this. Now, before we get into some of the critiques that I have, I did want to talk about the good stuff, okay, the stuff that I really enjoyed when it came to Miss Marvel. First and foremost, I loved the representation of an American Pakistani family and community living in New Jersey. I thought that was the best part of the show, and it's no surprise to me because of the creators involved here. The whole experience just felt so authentic, at least coming from my perspective as an outsider, and from what I've seen online, a lot of people within the community agree. Like, it's just so authentic and real and refreshing, and it avoids, you know, the stereotypes that someone might impose, especially if they're an outsider trying to tell this story. I think it was a beautiful sort of exploration of the life of an American Pakistani teenager. There's this balancing act that she has to juggle, where on the one hand she has this Pakistani immigrant family with their traditional values and customs, but on the other hand she's an American teenage girl and she has these hobbies and, you know, things that she wants to do that don't necessarily mesh well with the, you know, traditions and customs of her family. And that is something that a lot of immigrant people can relate to overall, not just Pakistani families, but, you know, anyone who comes from an immigrant family can relate to elements of this kind of juggling of two different cultures that you are a part of. I think that was explored wonderfully. We're starting to see that be explored in all of these different projects, like for example Turning Red, where we had a Canadian Chinese family, and you see some similar elements, but at the same time, because they are different cultures, you do see the differences in those cultures. I love the way that in Miss Marvel the Pakistani culture was really highlighted. That's something that we have unfortunately never really seen in mainstream media. It opened my eyes to so much. I learned so much, especially about the history of the partition in India and how the British just destroyed the country, as they did with a lot of places in the world, and the consequences, the real life consequences of that. So yeah, I just think that that entire exploration of this character's heritage and the character's, you know, family, their culture, their history was done superbly, and that is without a doubt where the series shines the most. And closely connected to the exploration of a Pakistani family. I also really enjoyed and appreciated the portrayal of a Muslim community in America, and you know, all of the, you know, positives as well as the negatives that come with that. You know, the positives being this feeling of community and oneness that they had and they shared, the respect for, you know, their spaces like the mosque, but also touching on some of the more intricate kind of internal mechanisms that you wouldn't really know about if you're an outsider, like for instance the difference in facilities for, you know, male members versus female members of the community. I found that to be a really fascinating point. It's not something that they, you know, delve into in a lot of depth, but it's just touches like that where it's like you can tell that it's coming from someone who is inside this community, who has first-hand experience, because an outsider wouldn't really note these things. I think the way that they portrayed it through Kamala's friend Nakia, who runs to be part of the mosque board, I think was really clever, because you're able to dive into those issues through this character and understand why it is that she wants to impose these changes and give a fresh point of view to the system in the mosque. And then of course there's the unfortunate Islamophobia that exists in America, that's also explored in this series, and how, you know, the people in the mosques and in the community are very familiar with the authorities knocking on their door. They've been there, they've done that, they've got the t-shirt, like they're used to being the prime suspects in crimes of the area because of the Islamophobia that exists in the community at large. And I think it was obviously unfortunate and sad to see, especially considering how these people, you know, they just want to worship in peace, they want to be a part of their own community in peace, but they are constantly hassled by the authorities. At the same time, because there was this like tight-knit community feel, it felt like they had a strength in that community. You know, their numbers gave them strength and reassurance, which I think was a really touching sentiment to explore on the show. And another element of exploring the Muslim community that I thought they did really well was showing, you know, how different people had different levels of religiousness and strictness to their religion. You know, some of the girls and women wore hijab, some of them didn't. You know, and of course you have Kamala's brother, who is very religious in comparison to her. She seems a bit lax. You know, she is religious, but she seems more lax than him. So yeah, showing how there are people who are on different levels when it comes to their faith and the strictness and adherence to the practices in their faith, I thought was really authentic as well. You see this in all different kinds of religion, and I think it was a necessary element to establish that this is a community of diverse peoples who have a lot in common but are still individuals. And another thing that I really loved about Miss Marvel was the family. I love the Khan family. I think they are such an authentic family on this show. Like, they feel like a real family. I love them, especially the mum. Oh my goodness, I think the mum was absolutely phenomenal. She gave an incredible performance, but she felt like such an authentic mother to Kamala, in every sense of the word. Even in moments where she was disapproving, where she was worried, where she was frantic, it still felt really authentic. I think the mum knocked it out of the park, but also the dad was really enjoyable as well, you know, and the connection that he had with his daughter, especially at the beginning of the show where, you know, he offers to go to the AvengerCon, is it, as the Hulk, and he's already got the green paint on, he's ready to go with her, but you know, he gets really offended when she doesn't want to go with him, and there's just this like really sad moment where it's like, oh, Mr. Khan. But I love the Khan family. I feel like they felt like such a genuine unit, and everyone did an amazing job at playing their part and to make this family feel real and whole. A huge part of the reason why I love the Khan family is of course because the casting was so superb, and I think the same can be said for the casting of Miss Marvel herself, who is portrayed by Iman Vellani. Oh my goodness, I thought she was amazing. I thought she was wonderful. What a lovely addition to the MCU. I think she did a great job portraying this young superhero. I think she's the youngest of them all, probably, and I think she held her own, absolutely. You know, even though I did have some issues with the storytelling and the action sequences, which we'll get into later, I think Iman Vellani did an amazing job of what she was given, and it made for a very endearing character. Now, I did mention recently, I can't remember which review it was, but I think it was Doctor Strange 2 actually, come to think of it, because I was talking about America Chavez, and I was talking about how with some of these young female superheroes that we've seen, like America Chavez and Kate Bishop, there is a bit of homogeneity when it comes to their personalities, and I think that is still the case with Iman Vellani's Miss Marvel, aka Kamala. I feel like Kamala, Kate and America are very similar personality wise, and I'm guessing that Marvel's endgame this time around is to have like a young Avengers situation, in which case we may have too many similar personalities in one team, and that won't be enough to create interesting team dynamics. Like, we need to have a little bit of friction amongst team members to really make it a dynamic feeling team. Take for instance the first Avengers lot, where Steve Rogers was at odds with Tony Stark, Thor was at odds with the Hulk. They had that internal competition about who was strongest. You know, there's always a little bit of friction, a little bit of, you know, something, a little bit of sauce there just to kick things up a notch when it comes to team dynamics. If everyone is really similar and getting along all the time, it's tough to kind of be invested in those dynamics. So they're going to have to work on that to really distinguish each of these female characters, because so far their personalities are a little bit samey. In terms of Iman Vellani's portrayal of the character, she did a great job, and I think in her own little bubble, in her own little corner of the MCU, she works really well as a protagonist. Okay, so now that we've gone through all of the stuff that I really loved about Miss Marvel, let's get into my critiques. And unfortunately, most of the critique lies with the storytelling, particularly as it pertains to the wider MCU, and you know, the connections that this little pocket of the MCU has to the rest of the franchise. I feel like those connections were weak as hell. I feel like the MCU side of the story was unfortunately the weakest part of this latest MCU series, which is not a good sign, right? So first of all, the villains, the Clandestines, don't care. Don't care, and honestly, it's way too hot for me to pretend to care. Like, I just, the Clandestines were a flop. What else can I terrible idea. First of all, the group itself just looked so underwhelming. Like, there was nothing special about the clandestine group that we were introduced to on the show. They just looked like ordinary people who were a part of some, I don't know, after work club or something. Like, just an eclectic group of people that had somehow come together under the leadership of this woman. It was just like a non-factor. I wasn't afraid of them. I didn't feel anything towards them. Oh, that was just a flop. It was a terrible flop. We didn't even get costumes. Like, we didn't even get them changing into their clandestine costumes to establish them as like one team of evildoers. And also, I must say, I was on socials recently and I did see that people mentioned that one of the problems that they had with the Clandestines was that they were portrayed by actors from different ethnic backgrounds, and it's not how it sounds. We love to see diversity, of course, but the thing is with the Clandestines is that there was nothing really setting them apart from any other group in the MCU. They were just a group of random people. Like, what was the connective tissue there? I would have preferred if they were all like Pakistani or Southeast Asian actors portraying the Clandestines, so that we know, okay, the Clandestines have a particular look, as do, you know, the Wakandan warriors, the Dora Milaje. Like, we understand the aesthetic. You know, it would have been like if the Dora Milaje all of a sudden had you know, members from all different races and ethnic backgrounds, even though they're supposed to be Wakandan specifically. Now, I know it's different with the Clandestines because they're from this other universe or whatever, but I'm just talking like aesthetically, it doesn't differentiate them from anything else going on in the universe, like with the Eternals or with the Asgardians. Like, everyone is starting to look the same. Everyone is starting to look the same, and I do think that having more specific casting choices could help differentiate these different groups from each other. But at the same time, if you wanted to keep the diversity diverse cast, at least have them wear a uniform, at least have them have a common power set, at least have them have something, instead of just having some random people wearing random street clothes and having no distinguishing elements to them whatsoever apart from subpar fighting skills. And we will definitely talk about the fighting skills in a moment, don't you even worry about it. But first of all, I also wanted to touch on the second bad guys of the series, and that was the Department for Damage Control. That was dead as well. Like I said, it's way too hot for me to pretend that I care. But I don't know what was going on with that. Like, I didn't even understand the storyline, honestly. And I didn't understand the storyline with the Clandestines either. That's another problem with, you know, them as a villain, is I didn't understand what was going on. They needed Kamala's bangle to open up the portal to their world, but then their world will take over our world and blah blah blah. I didn't understand. It was way too convoluted, and I wasn't invested enough in the characters or the storyline to care, so that certainly didn't help. So yeah, Clandestines were a bit of a mess, but so were the Department of Damage Control. Again, that should have been simple. That should have been simple because they're the Department of Damage Control, so of course they'd be interested in a soup running around, but it just became weird because it was like, don't you have better things to do? They are operating in New Jersey, which is like right next to New York. I presume, I'm not from the area, please. Okay, but I presume it's right next to New York. Don't they have like other superheroes to harass? Don't they have other things to do? Like, it was just baffling me that they were so hard pressed on this one girl who like shot, you know, beams one time. It wasn't even that deep. She didn't make the earth quake or anything. One of the things that the show was suggesting, I think, is that because she was likely a Muslim person or from the community in New Jersey, that's why they wanted to, you know, really get down to the bottom of this, because of that kind of Islamophobic element in the story, which I think is fair. They really should have done a better job of establishing Miss Marvel as a threat if they wanted to do that, because she literally didn't do anything apart from, you know, have these sparkly powers at AvengerCon. That's literally what set them off. Is that someone happened to have footage of her having these sparkly powers and she saved someone else from being crushed by something, and all of a sudden they were like, oh, she is, you know, priority number one, she is the most wanted person in America at the moment. Like, really? In the MCU? Like, are you sure about that? This is a universe where the sky is constantly falling, where there are massive beams coming from the sky because of aliens all the time, where literal godlike beings like the Celestials are being born from the Antarctic. Like, this is a universe where crazy things happen, and you want to pursue this young girl who happens to have like sparkly hands? Please give me a break. The fact that the whole storyline surrounding the Clandestines pretty much ended in like episode 5, only to make way for the big finale with the Department of Damage Control, I thought was absurd. I thought that was a terrible story choice. It should have been the other way around, where the Department of Damage Control were the B storyline, but instead they decided to end it off there. Like, that was the huge big deal ending that we needed. Spoiler alert, it was not. It was not, and I didn't care, and I wasn't invested, and I was disappointed in the finale. And speaking of the episodes themselves and being disappointed in the finale, this has become a little bit of a common theme in these Disney Plus shows. I don't know if you've noticed. I don't know if you've noticed, but for me personally, I've gotten used to saying that I was disappointed in a finale for a Disney Plus show. I think that's a problem that they should address sooner rather than later. I don't know how much time they have to take these corrective measures because they have so much in the pipeline at the moment, but they definitely need to look into that because it's starting to become a common theme, as I said. And we're starting to see common themes just all around when it comes to these Disney Plus shows, especially the 6-episode ones. We're able to figure out what's going to happen pretty much. I think I mentioned this in my Obi-Wan review. As this formula that is emerging with the Disney Plus shows, where you have, you know, the first couple of episodes, they pull you in, they intrigue you. Maybe episode 1 wasn't bombastic, wasn't huge, but episode 2 should hook you in. And then episodes 3 and 4 just kind of get lost in the wind. They tend not to be the best episodes of the season, but don't you worry, because episode 5 will come along and knock things out of the park, make you regain confidence in the show just in time for episode 6 to give you a pretty good season finale. A pretty, like, it could have been better, but it's pretty good as a season finale. It works, and overall you have a good taste in your mouth when you're done watching the show, and are pretty excited for the next season of the series if it is to get one. That's kind of the formula that we have started to see emerge from Disney Plus. But guess what? It's only been a few years since Disney Plus was created, since it's been a thing, and we've already started to notice this formula, so it cannot be sustainable. Okay, you know, platforms like Netflix have been around for what, a decade at this point, or even more. They don't have these discernible formulas that you can, you know, say all of the shows follow, and there's a lot more variety on that platform. But in the case of Disney Plus, they're trying to apply the same sort of formula to all of these different shows across different IP, mind you, not just with the Marvel shows. I don't think that's sustainable in the slightest. I think people are catching on. I think people are losing interest, and I think it's doing these shows and these characters a huge disservice. So we need to reintroduce diversity, not just in terms of, you know, representation on the screen, but also in types of storytelling and formats of storytelling that we're getting from these shows, because this one-size-fits-all approach is not working. Now, for my next point, I may seem like I'm contradicting myself just a little bit. Just a little bit, like, Jean, didn't just say, but hang on, what about, okay, but basically I did just want to raise the fact that this series does skew younger. I know what I said about formulas and one size fits all, but the difference here is that you can tell that this series is directed towards a younger, predominantly female audience. But guess what? I think this is wonderful. Okay, I think this is great. I've mentioned so many times on this channel about the just annoyance, okay, the anger I feel towards how people treat media that's primarily directed towards teenage girls. I hate it, okay? I hate how people turn their noses up at it, about how they act like it's not, you know, real television or real cinema if it's directed towards teenage girls. I just hate that shit. I hate it so much. And here we have an instance where unfortunately this show fell prey to the same kinds of criticism and derision, and it pissed me the hell off, okay? I don't see any problem with a series having, you know, a different demographic in mind. I don't see any problem with a series directed towards the predominantly teenage girl fan base within the MCU. There are so many young people who love this franchise and would love to see stories about characters that are more within their demographic. There is nothing wrong with that. Not everything is for everyone. However, I will say that regardless of who your demographic is, you do need to tell a rich, compelling story that will hook your audience in and make them invested in the character and the world that you're building. I feel like that's something that this series set up interestingly, but didn't really fulfill in the end. So I don't think that just because the series is predominantly directed towards young teenage girls that it gets a pass for kind of slipping and sliding on the storytelling on the show. Like, I don't think it deserves a pass. I think regardless of who your demographic is, you need to tell a good story, and the story here was a bit of a mess, you know, with the clandestines, with the Department of Damage Control, with all of that stuff. There were so many different leads that were just missing. Take for example with the Red Scarf Gang. I don't know who they were. I didn't know who these people were. All of a sudden they showed up. Kamala at first is fighting against one of them, but then they kind of team up just like that. They become best friends and they trust her enough to take her into their lair or whatever, their headquarters. And then there's this quick exposition before they go back out there and deliver another subpar action sequence. And it's just like, who are these people? I don't know what's going on. So that was done very poorly. It was so rushed. Apparently in the comics they're a bigger deal over several runs or issues of the comics themselves. So yeah, they didn't have any of that screen time here, and it did them a huge disservice. Another example of poor writing on the show definitely surrounded the character of Kamran and, you know, his relationship with his mother. The fact that his mother made this big sacrifice at the end there because she needed to close up the gates to the clandestine world using the powers of Noor and all of that. I was very confused again about the whole clandestine storyline. What the hell was going on there? Okay, but the problem is, not only was I confused, not only was it convoluted, but it also wasn't interesting. So I didn't care. I didn't care care to learn more. I didn't care to understand. But anyway, so overall, Cameron's character just felt wasted when it came to his, you know, storyline surrounding the Clandestines. But then on the flip side, you had his relationship with Kamala and how, you know, there was a bit of jealousy between him and Bruno. That was also wasted because in the end, the love triangle wasn't really fulfilled. And if anything, there was a bromance that developed between Bruno and Cameron. So I don't know what they were going for there. It certainly didn't help that at the end, you know, he ended up having similar powers to Kamala, which I feel like took a little bit of the spotlight off of her. But then they had him, what did he do? Did he make like the ultimate sacrifice or something? I don't think he's dead, is he? I can't remember. It's been a while since I've seen the finale, by the way. I can't remember, and I don't care to watch it again. But they did something to take him out of the equation so that she could shine better. But it's not great that he had the same power set as her. Let's be real. Like, you want our protagonist to be unique and special. Like, you don't want her to have the same power set as this other guy. So yeah, I think he just didn't need to be on the show. He didn't need to be there. He was cute. Like, I liked, you know, looking at the character and in his, you know, connection with Kamala. That was fun, but he didn't need to be. And I must say, another thing that I didn't love about the story was the tension between Kamala and her mother. I like the fact that there was tension there at the beginning, you know, the differences in these characters and how they kind of clashed a little bit, how Kamala's mother had these expectations of her that she felt were too much and it was too much pressure. We've seen these kinds of themes play out in other projects, like for example Turning Red, and I think it's a really interesting dynamic to explore. But my problem was that I just really wanted them to get along, and I really wanted Kamala to tell her mother that she was the bright light, night light, whatever they were calling her before. I just wanted her to tell her. Like, I wanted them to be on the same page so much, and they waited until the very last moment for her mother to find out. And I just like, I wish it wasn't, you know, the big secret that they made it out to be in the first 4 episodes of the show. I think they should have just come clean much earlier, so they would have worked together as a family to figure out how to deal with this. And finally, to get to my last critique of the show, I feel bad because I feel like I've just been sitting here hating on it, but it wasn't my favorite. It had so much potential, but yeah, there were issues, okay? But the final issue I wanted to mention in this video was the action sequences. I've been hinting towards it, you know, all throughout the video, but they were bad. Yeah, they were really bad. Now, here's the thing, okay? I have so much respect for the actors, for the choreographers, for the stunt team who are carrying out these sequences. Lord knows I could never. Like, Lord knows I'm sitting here, I could never do half of what they did on screen. So I must humble myself and appreciate what they were able to accomplish, you know, week in and out in these episodes. But unfortunately, just from experience of watching a ton of other media, you know, and just mentally comparing what I've seen in the past in comparison to what's displayed here, they weren't great. It wasn't great. It wasn't the best of the best. And even though, like I said, this series is clearly targeted towards a specific demographic that doesn't necessarily fit me, I can still acknowledge that work needed to be done in order to really sell these action sequences and do the character justice. It's all about doing this character justice so that she feels like a major part of the MCU, especially because she is a character who diverges from the typical kind of representation that we see in media at large, but also in, you know, these superhero spaces. It feels like she needs to do more in order to prove her worth. It shouldn't be this way. It absolutely should not be this way, and it sucks that it's this way, but it's true. Like, if she is going to be this Pakistani American hero, we really need to see her deliver on the heroics. We really need to see her deliver on the action sequences, and unfortunately she didn't. So in this case, the action sequences needed work, as did the portrayal of her superpowers. I liked the changes that they made to the comics, where in the comics she's kind of like Mr. Fantastic, but with just her hands and fists that get really big. I think that looks ridiculous both in the comics comics and also in the game. My brothers used to play the Avengers game. I thought it looked ridiculous there as well. And I'm glad that they changed it, okay? It looks much cooler as it does in the show with the kind of crystal effect. But in the end, in the finale, we saw her use the kind of big fists a little bit more. It was supposed to be like a huge reveal, and I didn't like that. I think the big fists look ridiculous. I'm sorry. I like so much about the character, but the big fists look dead. I was glad to see them get rid of the big fist for the majority of the show, and I was glad to see them use her powers in a more versatile way, where she's able to make these like platforms. They were cool, they were fun, but overall, unfortunately, I feel like there was more that needed to be done in order to establish her as a really cool addition to the MCU roster. I also think it didn't help that she didn't actually save anyone from anything. You know, if you think about it, there weren't enough scenes of her being a hero. There was one scene where she was saving this kid, and obviously it was her first go at it, so it was a little bit rusty, it was a little bit it was a bit rocky, bumpy, okay, it wasn't perfect, and the kid ended up breaking his leg. Is that what he said at the end there? I thought that was hilarious, but also rude as hell. But after that, there aren't really moments where we see her saving people. You know, she's kind of running away from people who are trying to get the bangle when it comes to the Clandestine storyline, and then when it comes to the Department of Damage Control, she's running away from them because they are afraid of her and see her as a threat. But she's not actually saving anyone, which I think we needed in order to, like I said, establish her as New Jersey's own hero. Okay, so now that we've gone through the positives and negatives of Miss Marvel, the last thing I wanted to talk about was the end credits scene, where we got a cameo from none other than Carol Danvers, who Kamala is a massive fan of. And in this end credits scene, we see Kamala get warped and transported out to God knows where through this portal, but then to replace her, we see Carol Danvers herself kind of pop out of the closet. She comes out of the closet into Kamala's room and she's like, what am I doing here? And it's like, oh, let's see what happens in the Marvels, which Kamala will be in also. It was a cute cameo. It wasn't the best that we've seen, honestly. And I also think that Carol herself didn't look her best. You know, her costume looked very cheap. It didn't look like she was carrying out a mission in that uniform. It felt like she had just been chilling in her downtime and all of a sudden she popped out of nowhere into Kamala's bedroom. But it was cute, you know, having her as a cameo on the show. Obviously, Kamala is a huge fan of the character, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Nia DaCosta does with these characters in the sequel to Captain Marvel. But in the meantime, I'm going to be giving Miss Marvel a 6.5 out of 10. So that's it from me. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on Miss Marvel, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of this series down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.